Week 3 of the NFL season is upon us, and we have already broken down the running back and wide receiver rankings for the week in fantasy football. In today's video, we are going to be tackling two positions at the same time, the quarterback and the tight end position, going through my top 20 quarterback and tight end rankings and tiers for the week. Before we get into things, please make sure that if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying, that you hit that subscribe button down below. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with the quarterbacks in the must-start quarterback ones tier. Now, we do not discuss players that already played on Thursday Night Football because you magically can't just throw Josh Allen or Tua Tagovailoa or Dalton Kincaid or for some reason Tanner Connor into your lineup. So we're just going to be talking about players that are eligible to play on Sunday or Monday. Josh Allen was in the must-start quarterback ones tier as my quarterback two, so now it is just Lamar Jackson in the must-start quarterback ones tier. Back-to-back weeks as the quarterback four in fantasy football. Lamar Jackson is reliable, very reliable week in and week out. This matchup up against the Detroit Lions at home in Baltimore on Monday Night Football has all the makings to potentially be the highest scoring game on the week. So Lamar Jackson is a no-brainer starter every single week regardless of the matchup. So in a matchup where it might be the highest scoring game of the week, you have to have him ranked inside of the top two. Moving now to the mid-range must-start quarterback ones with Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, Drake May, as well as Indiana Jones, Daniel Jones. Jalen stop it hurts headlines here up against the LA Rams. Jalen Hurts has played quite well up against the Rams last season, so I do really think this will be a big game out of Jalen Hurts. Now, there definitely are some reasons to worry about Jalen Hurts because the team proved to us last week up against the Chiefs in Kansas City that they don't necessarily need to have a super high scoring offense in order to win. Jalen Hurts passed for 101 yards in that game, and it wasn't like, oh, he rushed for 70 plus yards. No, he had 9 carries for 15 yards, 1 total touchdown, right? So if this Eagles team really is that good that they don't need to be putting up high totals with Jalen Hurts, that is going to be worrisome for his projection week in and week out. But this game up against the LA Rams has all of the makings of that back and forth shootout, rock'em sock'em robots level affair game. Quarterback 8 in week 1 up against the Cowboys, quarterback 26 last week. Again, I do have my worries with this offense as a whole because they don't need to put up a crazy amount of points in order to win games, but up against the LA Rams offense, I think this will end up being a higher scoring game, so I do believe that Jalen Hurts will pay dividends in this matchup. Next up, we got Dak Prescott going up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago. Dak Prescott, week number 1, kind of so-so. I thought he looked good in the film. In terms of fantasy production, just the quarterback 29 up against the Eagles in Philadelphia. Week 2 up against the Giants, he puts up a big game as the quarterback number 5. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 INT. I think we see a very similar performance this week up against the Chicago Bears. 2 defenses that really aren't all that up to snuff, so this does have the makings of that matchup last week up against the Giants where it is very high scoring, and that does push Dak later on into the game to having to throw the ball a ton. So Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, you are feeling great about CeeDee Lamb week in and week out in good matchups. Now, next week, he goes up against the Packers, so that might be a stinker. It's the Micah Parsons revenge game. Maybe Dak Prescott is getting laid out a bunch in that game, but ultimately this week up against the Bears, you got to be feeling real nicey. Next up, we got Baker Mayfield. Now, basically, the whole entire offensive line is hurt of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so that definitely does hurt Baker because he's going to have less time to throw the ball. Baker obviously is a guy, though, that does he's a mobile quarterback, right? He can run the ball. He's not a quote-unquote prototypical rushing quarterback, but he definitely can do it. Going up against the Jets defense, on paper, not the best matchup, but in real life, you know, the games aren't played on paper, and the Jets defense really isn't all that great, if I'm being honest with you. Seems like Emeka Egbuka is going to play, so Baker Mayfield feels like a safe bet to be a top 12-ish option, and if the Jets offense shows some life under Tyrod Taylor, then we could see this game leading towards Baker having to throw the ball a little bit more. But even last week in a lower scoring game up against the Texans, Baker was still able to put up 20 fantasy points. Next up, we got Patrick Mahomes this week going up against the New York Football Giants on Sunday Night Football. Now, Patrick Mahomes was a guy that I really didn't like that much in the summer for fantasy because Patrick Mahomes has back-to-back years where he really has not even remotely paid off at ADP. I thought this was a team that's going to have a rock-solid defense and just run the ball a shit ton with Pacheco. That really hasn't been the case. Now, they don't have Worthy this week, even though there was reports that maybe Worthy would play, but even I kind of was pretty pessimistic on that. I figured if he played, maybe he'd be a decoy. He's not playing, so it's Hollywood, it's Juju Smith-Schuster, it's Thornton. There's this isn't the best wide receiver room ever, but up against the Giants, Mahomes has been a top 6 quarterback in back-to-back weeks. So, when guys are playing this well, you don't want to turn your back on him, especially in a good matchup. Next up, we got the Iceman, Drake May, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers have one of the highest paid defenses in the NFL, and somehow they're one of the worst defenses in the NFL, getting dicked down in back-to-back weeks. This week, going up against the New England Patriots offense, I feel good about Drake May. He sliced up the Dolphins defense last week as the quarterback 3. I do definitely think the Steelers defense is better than the Dolphins defense, but not by a crazy wide margin based upon play through the first 2 weeks of the season. So Drake May is kind of a guy that's just going to be a top 12 quarterback in positive matchups. If the matchup isn't ideal, maybe he's like the quarterback 13 or 16, but we've felt good about Drake May through the first 2 games, so he feels good being ranked here. Final guy is going to be Indiana Jones, Daniel Jones, quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts, going up against the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is going to be the Saints of last year, right? Where Derek Carr and the Saints are elbow-dropping defenses, where, holy shit, the Saints look like one of the best teams in the NFL, and then it all comes crumbling down right after that, and the team is absolutely dog shit. They're a laughing stock. They were a Mickey Mouse 2-0 team. Maybe that's the case here with the Indianapolis Colts, but based on what we've seen through 2 games, Daniel Jones has been a top 7 quarterback in both games. The Tennessee Titans defense, in my opinion, is a little bit underrated, but if Daniel Jones can keep getting these rushing touchdowns, he's going to continue to be very safe week in and week out. He has a solid amount of weapons around him, and again, at some point, you have to start giving the guy credit, and at this point, it is very clear that he deserves the credit, and I'm going to give it to him as a top 8 quarterback on the week. Moving now on into the low-end quarterback ones tier here, headlined by Justin Herbert, the pervert quarterback of the LA Chargers, going up against the Denver Broncos. Now, entering into the year, I didn't really like Justin Herbert in fantasy because while they have a decent amount of weapons, they have Ladd McConkey, they have Keenan Allen, they have Quentin Johnston. This is a team that's identity last season was a team that really wanted to run the ball. This is a Harbaugh system. They want to run the rock, but this year they completely flipped the script and are throwing the ball at a very high rate. Justin Herbert, 19 plus points in back-to-back games, has yet to have a turnover, knock on wood, on the season. You just have to feel good about him as a top 12 option at this point. Next up, we got Caleb Williams going up against the Cowboys. If Mr. Unlimited was able to put up a big game up against the Dallas Cowboys defense last week, I understand that there's questions about how good really is Caleb Williams, and can Ben Johnson really figure things out here? Can he be the quarterback whisperer? Shout out to Adam Gase. That is to be seen, but Caleb Williams has scored 18 plus points in back-to-back games. That was the QB9 in week 1 up against the Minnesota Vikings. They got Cleveland steamered by the Detroit Lions in Detroit last week. The Ben Johnson coming home party didn't end up going too well for the Chicago Bears, but again, great matchup. You got to trust Caleb. Next up, we got Big Dick Bo Nix, quarterback of the Denver Broncos, going up against the LA Superchargers in LA. Not the most pristine matchup. I do like the Chargers defense a solid amount. They had Geno Smith looking like Ray Charles last week, but there's definitely a gap between Bo Nix and Geno Smith. Kind of always know Geno Smith has that terrible game in him, right? Because that's just who he used to be. Going up against the Chargers, again, not the most premier matchup. I just am going to believe in Bo Nix week in and week out. There's a reason why I drafted him as a top 12 quarterback, and that is to not overreact early on in the season. It's week 3. Look, if it's week 6 and Bo Nix has, multiple other games like week 1 where he looked like he couldn't see at all the defense, like he was rocking an eye patch, shout out to Najee Harris, in one of his eyes, where he had 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions this week. I think a stat line more similar to last week up against the Colts with 200 plus passing yards, 20 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 INT seems very, very reasonable. Final guy to discuss in this tier is going to be Jared Goff going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Now, I know there is a small sample size of Jared Goff going up against the Baltimore Ravens, that he really hasn't fared well up against the Ravens. But for one, trends are meant to be broken. And for two, that small of a sample size shouldn't move the needle for you, right? It shouldn't completely change the pendulum of your projection of Jared Goff. Week 1, Jared Goff took what was given to him, right? He's 31-39. They lose to the Packers. They get stomped by the Packers. Week 2, he goes up against the Bears, puts up belt-to-ass numbers, 300-plus passing yards, 5 tugs, 0 INTs as the quarterback 1. This feels like more of a middling matchup. Not going to be similar to what he did last week where he threw 5 touchdowns, but could be the highest scoring game of the week. I think he finds his way inside of the top 12. Now moving to the high-end quarterback 2s, beginning with the short king, the midget quarterback, the little tykes quarterback, Kyler Murray going up against the San Francisco 49ers in Santa Clara. Back-to-back no bueno weeks out of Kyler Murray. Ultimately, though, with that rushing floor, you have to feel good about him as a high-end quarterback, too. I think ranking him inside the top 12 with back-to-back finishes outside the top 12 would be a little bit egregious up against a 49ers defense that isn't absolutely terrible. So Kyler's going to be fine. You just feel all right about starting him. Next up, we got Trevor Lawrence going up against the Houston Texans at home in Duval. Trevor Lawrence was a guy in week number 1 where I was banging the drum heavily for him. I talked about how you should pick him up. It's a great matchup up against the Panthers. And then he absolutely reams you with 11 fantasy points as the QB 23. Last week, another wet dream matchup up against the Cincinnati Bengals. And I said, you know what? I'm pumping the brakes. I didn't love what I saw in week number 1. And then he actually has a solid game in week number 2, though he did throw 2 interceptions, 3 touchdowns. There's still a lot of worries. They have all of these weapons, but it just doesn't seem to be functioning correctly with Liam Cohen and the Jaguars. Now, Trevor Lawrence, he looks great when he's throwing the ball to Diami Brown. He looks great when he's dumping that shit off to ETN, to Bishal Tootin. But the second you throw it to one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, bdge, and this excellent prospect in Travis Hunter, shit just doesn't work correctly. So there's a lot of question marks. This is a tough matchup, but I just think Trevor Lawrence will finish in this range most weeks, where he probably doesn't win you your week. He's probably not a top 5 quarterback, but somewhere from quarterback 13 to 18-ish feels pretty fair for him. Next up, we got Marcus Mariota, quarterback of the Washington Commanders, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders at home in Washington this week. Now, Marcus Mariota, when you go back to last season when he played for the Washington Commanders, he was the quarterback 9 in week 7 up against the Panthers, and the quarterback 6 in week 18 up against the Dallas Cowboys. I understand that is a small sample size, and I understand you can't just rank him in the top 10 because of that, but Marcus Mariota did play incredibly well when he was the starting quarterback for the team. The Raiders defense doesn't really scare me all that much. Mariota does have some solid rushing upside even in his older age, so I'm not going to rank him inside the top 12, even though I think he could easily finish there, because there are just worries as a whole of, hey, this is his first start with the team for this season. Maybe things just don't go well, because again, he's an older quarterback. Marcus Mariota didn't look great at other stops, but maybe this system in Washington is very beneficial to him, and that's why he has been able to produce. Final guy in this tier is going to be Jake Browning, quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, going up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings over in Minnesota. Now, Jake Brown pulled a horseshoe out of his locker and halftime when he got to play, and he put it in his pocket because he looked great up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Still threw 3 picks, though. He was on his Jameis Winston, 3 tugs, 3 INTs as the quarterback 14. Had multiple high-value games in 2023 when Joe Burrow ended up getting hurt. He has all of the weapons at his disposal. The Vikings defense kind of reeks of being a little bit fraudulent, though the biggest worry here would be that Carson Wentz isn't able to do much, because I know, Nick, you always talk about how Kevin O'Connell's the quarterback whisperer, and he is. He saved Sam Darnold's career. He revived the man's career, gave him a little bit of revive, right? And I think maybe he could get Carson Wentz playing okay, but there's also a scenario where maybe the Bengals just run away with this one, and they're running the ball a lot late, and that hurts Jake Browning. But again, Jake Browning has been reliable for fantasy in the past when they've called upon him, so he does feel good enough to be ranked in this tier. Hopefully, Carson Wentz is able to keep up. Now we move on into the 5th tier here, and that is with Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet, Michael Penix, Geno Smith, as well as McCorkle Jones as the mid-range quarterback 2s before we start talking about the mid-range quarterback 2s and the rest of the quarterbacks, and then move on into the tight ends. I would like to give you guys a word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you are brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you will get a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you play $5 in the pick'em, you receive $50 in bonus funds. If you don't know how the pick'em works on Underdog, it's incredibly simple. You pick the higher or the lower on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher. Make sure you guys do check that out, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, Jordan Love feels kind of like he's going to be a nice glove fit as a high-end quarterback 2 week in and week out. Shout out to OJ Simpson. If the glove don't fit, we must acquit. Quarterback 17 in week 1, quarterback 13 in week number 2. But I will pump the brakes here up against the Cleveland Browns because this should be a game where the Green Bay Packers get up early, and I don't think geriatric Joe Flacco is going to be able to keep up. And what I mean by that is if they get up by it's 14-0 at halftime and Jordan Love has 1 touchdown and maybe Josh Jacobs gets the other touchdown, then I don't think Jordan Love is live to get 3+ touchdowns in this game. Back-to-back weeks with 2 touchdowns. He's going to be fine. I think he's going to be a reliable mid-range quarterback too, but I just don't like his expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros have him as the quarterback 13. To me, that seems too high in a matchup where they should roll early on and they won't need to rely on him late. Next up, we got Michael Penix Jr. of the Carolina Panthers. Interesting tidbit about Michael Penix. He does not like when you call him Michael Penis. Quarterback 10 in week 1. Last week up against the Minnesota Vikings, it wasn't cold out there, but you would have thought it was because Michael Penix shriveled up in that game. Ultimately, though, that's just a joke because the Atlanta Falcons put belt to ass on the Minnesota Vikings. They ran the ball a ton with Algier as well as Bijan Robinson, and the game was over before it even started. Romo's cousin, Juan Romo, was kicking a bunch of field goals in that game. It was too easy for them. They didn't have to throw the ball a bunch, so Michael Penix was kind of just chilling with 5 fantasy points. The week prior, up against the Bucks, late game heroics. He looks great. Quarterback number 10, up against the Panthers in Carolina. If Bryce Young is able to build upon late in last game, this could be a higher scoring game where at least Michael Penix gets the opportunity to throw the ball more than 21 times. Next up, we got Geno Smith of the Raiders going up against the left hands up, who are we, the Commanders in Washington. Last week was the kind of game where you just burn the tape. You watch that game and you're like, Geno Smith looked absolutely atrocious. 180 passing yards, 0 tugs, 1, 2, 3 interceptions in prime time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Geno Smith's game put a majority of America straight to sleep. Call him NyQuil. Geno Smith going up against the Commanders, much better matchup. I just think Geno's another one of these guys where, you know, if you're in a super flex league, Geno's your quarterback too. He's all reliable. If he's your quarterback 1 in fantasy football, there's a lot more question marks because he probably won't have those top 5 games. But if there ever was a week, it would be up against the Commanders here. I do like this matchup for him. Next up, we got McCorkle Jones going up against the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals defense is banged up like a motherfucker. Quarterback 9 last week up against the Saints in New Orleans. Is Mac Jones better than Brock Purdy is what some crazy people will say. Ultimately, Brock Purdy probably would have put up similar numbers, if not a better game. 3 tugs, no INTs for him last week. Good matchup here. Feels relatively safe. Honestly, if we're just speaking about on a safety standpoint, Mac Jones is probably the 2nd safest quarterback in this tier. Final tier here is going to be tier numero 6 with the low-end quarterback 2s with Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, as well as Mono Man Sam. Bryce Young to start off last week was straight up dysfunctional, in dire need of some Cialis, some Blue Chew. They don't sponsor me though, so no free shout outs. 25 as the quarterback in week 1, quarterback 8 in week 2, but it started off with a disaster. Early on in the first drive, fumble, and it's a touchdown for the other team, the Arizona Cardinals. And then at halftime, it's like Bryce Young has 2 fantasy points, what it felt like. Nick, he actually had 4 fantasy points, but you get the point, right? He has like 2 fucking fantasy points at halftime. It's a disaster, and I have Bryce Young as my super flex in my super flex league, and I'm sitting there just crying myself watching the game. I already watched my Dolphins get absolutely filleted by the Patriots. I'm sitting there like, when will the suffering end? And then Bryce Young in the second half turns things up. I win my fantasy matchup by 1 point, so shout out to Bryce Young. Things would have been just as easy, though, if I started Mac Jones as well. But Bryce Young looking good up against the Falcons here, in my opinion. Hopefully builds off what we saw in the second half, because if he plays like the first half version of himself throughout the whole game, Bryce Young might be like the quarterback 30. So definitely a lot more risk here. The further down you get in the rankings, the more risky it is. If you have to play Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or Sam Darnold in your quarterback, as your quarterback one in a one quarterback league, you are not feeling nicey. CJ Stroud going up against the Jaguars in Duval. This would be, in my opinion, like a 4 to 5 star matchup in GTA, right? This is the kind of matchup that you go to sleep thinking about. You wake up rock hard thinking about the fact that your quarterback gets to go up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The kind of matchup that is so exquisite. You're so excited about it. But with CJ Stroud, I don't think you could be excited about any matchup. That offensive line is useless. The offensive line is terrible. Bottom of the barrel. CJ Stroud has the yips. He's worried. He's nervous that a bunch of men are going to tag team him behind the offensive line. It is scary. It is hard to watch. Ultimately, though, Stroud has had a bad offensive line his whole entire career as a Houston Texans quarterback. So hopefully he's able to rekindle that magic up against the Jaguars, but based on the first 2 weeks, you can't be feeling too nice about that. Final guy here is going to be Mono Man Sam going up against the Saints. Solid matchup for him. Back-to-back weeks outside the top 20, though, so how can you rank him any higher than this? Without Kevin O'Connell, he's been fine, but just 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs on the season. Nothing too special out of Mono Man Sam Darnold. Moving now on into the tight end position. Now, the tight ends are very simple at the top. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren, Tucker Kraft Mac and Cheese. If you have any of those guys, you already knew you are going to start them. You didn't have to watch this video. You didn't need to hear me give these guys the Gawk Gawk 9000. You already knew you were going to start them. Trey McBride is as reliable as it gets. Sure, the guy can't score a touchdown to save his fucking life, but top 12 quarterback in back-to-back games. Good matchup for the tight end up against the Niners. Nothing really to worry about here. Brock Bowers of the Raiders going up against the Commanders in Washington. Week 1, great numbers as the tight end 2. Week 2, not so hot up against the Chargers, but he's coming off the injury. Plus, not only is he coming off the injury, Geno Smith was blind prior to the game, so that didn't really help out Brock Bowers either, so don't really worry about that. Tyler Warren next up against the Tennessee Titans, currently listed as questionable. Seems as though he is going to be good to go, though, as he is off of the injury report. Tight end 3, tight end 7. Daniel Jones loves Tyler Warren. Daniel Jones trusts Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren was one of my late round dart throw tight ends that I really liked, along with Tucker Kraft. Both those guys paying dividends. Both those guys seem very reliable. So again, Tyler Warren at this point in the season just has to be ranked this high. Tucker Kraft Mac and Cheese going up against the Browns in Cleveland. My only worry here is, for one, he's banged up. He suffered an injury in practice with the knee. Seems like he's going to be good to go. So not really going to worry, but he might be limited, right? Russell Wilson is Mr. Unlimited. Tucker Kraft, Mr. Limited this week. Could be more of a decoy. Could maybe not get as many targets. But again, when you're talking about one of the guys that has been so reliable through the first 2 weeks of the season, touchdown in back-to-back games, over 120 yards last week, and a tug, tight end number 1, I have Tucker Kraft on my team. If I had Tucker Kraft and, maybe Juwan Johnson, maybe you would consider that, right? But if you had Tucker Kraft and you had Jake Ferguson, I'm just rolling the dice on Tucker Kraft this week up against the Browns in Cleveland. Moving now into the second tier here, which is going to be the mid-range must-start tight end ones with Juwan Johnson, Sam Laporta, as well as Mr. Swift, Travis Kelce. Tight end 1 in week 1, tight end 4 in week 2 for Juwan Johnson. It's going to be absolutely hilarious if Juwan Johnson was like the waiver wire guy this season. You picked him up after week 1 as the tight end 1, and he's just all reliable for you. Fine matchup here up against the Seattle Seahawks. Ultimately, there's always that fear, that worry deep in the pit of my stomach that, hey, Juwan Johnson's attached to Spencer Rattler. That shoots off a bunch of warning signals into my brain. But back-to-back weeks with 9+ targets, He's heavily involved, just like how we talked about how, hey, Tyler Warren is Daniel Jones' safety blanket. Juwan Johnson is the safety blanket of Spencer Rattler. And it's crazy that the fucking safety blanket of those two guys are this good in fantasy. Next up, we got Sam Laporta going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Didn't play too hot last week. He was banged up in entering into the game. No need to really worry, in my opinion. I'm not panicking on Mr. Laporta. The Detroit Lions offense is good. Should be a high-scoring game environment. Sam Laporta has the upside to score. At this point, where there were so many landmines at the tight end position, if you drafted Sam Laporta, you're feeling good. At number 7, we got Travis Kelce going up against the Giants in MetLife. Back-to-back games as a top 10 tight end. Last week would have had an even bigger game if he put some stickum on his gloves before the game, but he dropped a pass. The Eagles picked that shit off, and that was kind of, a big turning point inside of that game. Maybe the Chiefs ended up winning, but, ifs and buts are like candies and nuts, right? And that's not how the game played out. I like Travis Kelce still. Again, he's been pretty reliable. So, again, with some of these guys, it's just these guys have been reliable. You're going to keep playing them. Now moving into tier 3, right? The first 2 tiers, you're feeling pretty good. Now starts to, a little bit of nervousness sets in. The low-end tight end number 1s with Jake Fergalicious Ferguson, Harold Fannin, Zach Ertz, as well as Kyle Pitts Sr. So, Jake Ferguson, last week, looked great. Tight end number 3, week 1, not so much. Jake Ferguson might end up out-targeting George Pickens. He's a nice safety valve for Dak Prescott. If you think the Chicago Bears versus Dallas Cowboys will be a high-scoring game like I do, you like both these matchups, you don't think the defenses are all that good, then Jake Ferguson, you can almost even push him up to the next tier, but I still feel, there's just those slight worries with Jake Ferguson that, Dak Prescott's just going to have some type of meltdown game. Next up, we got Harold Fannin going up against the Green Bay Packers. Now, Harold Fannin has straight up snatched the chain, Aqib Talib style, of Mr. David Njoku, the Chief. I still love Njoku. This is a 2 tight end system. Shout out to Rob Gronkowski. We're not shouting out the other guy, Aaron Hernandez. If you know, you know. But tight end 6 in week 1, tight end 12 in week 2. This is a great matchup for a tight end. So while I do still think Njoku's time to shine is coming, I still think you got to be ranking Fannin higher than him. Next up, we got Zach Ertz going up against the Raiders at home in Washington. We'll see how Marcus Mariota plays. I feel confident in him. Back-to-back games inside the top 13, back-to-back games with the touchdown. It's very clear that he's heavily integrated into this offense, even though the guy is as old as dust. At number 11, we got Kyle Pitts going up against the Carolina Panthers. Could this be the year where Kyle Pitts is actually reliable? I say could, not this is. So we got to pump the brakes a little bit. Hot week 1 up against the Bucs. Great matchup for him. Tight end 7. Last week, tight end 17. But he still scored you 8 fantasy points. So, he didn't screw the pooch. Again, the worry here might be that the Falcons do exactly what they did last week, which is just they run away with the game because the Panthers, they just don't look that great. But Kyle Pitts was pretty reliable last week, even so, up against the Vikings when they put up a big game. So, or when the Vikings just couldn't do anything, so they ran the ball a ton. So, you're still feeling fine about Kyle Pitts. Next tier, here's tier number 4. Now, this is where we will draw a giant line. The first tier, the second tier, the third tier, all the guys in the top 12, you feel really good about them. You feel, or at least you don't feel terrible about them. Now is where it's like, DEFCON 1, holy fuck, this is bad, right? Beginning with the definition of holy fuck, it's bad. TJ Hawkinson going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Great matchup. TJ Hawkinson has 7 fantasy points in the first 2 games, and now his quarterback is Carson Wentz. Maybe Carson Wentz goes back to his old ways. He starts force-feeding TJ Hawkinson. Great matchup up against the Bengals. Bada bing, bada boom, step inside the room. Hawkinson's great. Or, like a seal, it's the same shit, different day, SSDD, and TJ Hawkinson scores 3 fantasy points. And you're like, wow, Nick, I'm glad you didn't rank him higher. Next up, we got David Njoku going up against the Packers. Back-to-back games, not so hot. Both games outside the top 12. Again, I do think brighter days are ahead for Njoku, but Fannin clearly taken over as the tight end 1. Next up is Hunter Henry. Hot week 1, scores 11 fantasy points. Last week, not so hot, just 2 fantasy points as the tight end 44. They really exploited the Dolphins' run defense in that game. Ramondre Stevenson looked like Barry Jackson. It just was not very good. So, and I just called him Barry Jackson. I know a lot of the old heads are going to get mad. Nick, it's Barry Sanders at Bo Jackson, you fucking idiot. I hope you guys thought that was funny. And I'm not being serious. You know, I'm not an ageist guy. I don't hate you if you're an old head that watched Barry Sanders and Bo Jackson. I just combine their names for some reason. It's what happens sometimes. You know, they're older players. I didn't see them play. So Hunter Henry going up against the Steelers. Fine matchup for him. Feels like a get-right game, get-back game. Feel fine about him. Next up, we got Dallas Goedert going up against the LA Rams. Go-Gurt himself. If you ever had a Go-Gurt when you were a kid, you know that shit is absolutely fire. The banana and strawberry one, chef's kiss menu of week, tastes like it was made by Gordon Ramsay himself. No injury designation for Sunday with the knee. Missed last week. Again, the Eagles feel like a giant roulette spin. And it's not a roulette wheel with just one green. It's one of those where you go to like Vegas and there's 0, there's 00, and now they put down like their logo on the thing and it's 000 with garbage odds. This is a terrible roulette spin on Goddard with the Eagles just because, hey, the offense just might not need to throw a bunch in this game, but Goddard was very involved in the offense in week 1 where A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were watching from the cuck chair. So if that continues, Goddard's just going to stay in this range. Final guy here is the Colonel, Jatavion Colonel Sanders, going up against the Atlanta Falcons at home in Carolina. Heavily utilized last week, 9 targets, 7 receptions for 54 yards. Will that continue is definitely a large question. But again, once you kind of get into this range, you're kind of just chucking stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. So I think Sanders is fair in this range. Next and final tier inside of the tight ends is Oz is going to be the low-end tight end 2 tier here with Brenton Strange, Mark Andrews, Chig Okonkwo, as well as Jonnu Smith, who I wish was still on the Dolphins, instead of fucking Darren Waller, who, by the grace of the football gods, might return next week. I don't think so, but that's what they're saying. A lot of people are saying Darren Waller's coming back. Brenton Strange, I want to trust him. I want to love him because I think Brenton Strange is very talented, but Trevor Lawrence is so dick cheese that we can't rank him higher than this. Next up is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, buddy. You know Isaiah Likely's coming back soon? You know that your job might get stolen from you? What the fuck, man? 3 fantasy points through the first 2 games of the season? It reeks of last year. We saw this last season. Andrews not doing much first 5-6 games, and then after that, if you cut Mark Andrews, you're feeling like a fool. This should be a high-scoring game, but at this point, can you trust Mark Andrews? The answer to that question is 3 words. Those words are, fuck no, baby. Next up, we got Chig Okonkwo going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Chig, 4 targets, then 6 targets. I think once Cam Ward figures things out, we're going to feel good about starting Chig. Right now, not so much a desperation start. Jonnu Smith, last week there were comments in the comment section, Nick, I can't believe you have Jonnu Smith listed as a sit, Nick. I can't believe you don't have Jonnu Smith ranked higher. Did you see how good Aaron Rodgers looked in week 1 up against the Jets? He's going to do that again up against the Seahawks. Nick, you're a fucking idiot. Ha 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 ha. This guy is in a tight end by committee with Pat Freiermuth. Okay? He's the tight end 11 in week 1. He scores a touchdown. He has 15 receiving yards. The next game, 4 for 4 like he was at Wendy's for 27 yards. Show me something before I can rank you higher. So thank you so much for watching today's video. If you ended up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It'd help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so. Link in the video description at NotoriousFantasy. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen them already. Hit the like button. I love you guys so much. We'll be live tomorrow, Sunday morning, at least 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We might even start earlier than that. I love you guys so much. Thank you for everything this season. Love you long time. See you guys soon. As always, good boy.